Thank you very much, WPSCDU, and let me thank, through you, Brookings Institution for the invitation to participate in this very distinguished panel on very actual issues and on the BRICS, on the next BRICS Summit in Ufa in Russia. Well, I think a number of very good points have been raised by Secretary Mehta, by Nandan just now, and now you asked more specifically about Brazil's expectations with regard to UFA. I think most, at least part of that has already been raised and has to do with what BRICS itself means right now for the not just for its members, but for the world. I think it does have an increasing impact in the international affairs and system that we see, and that has to do, I think, basically with the fact that, I mean, one point I think Nandan put it just now in terms of a certain dissatisfaction that exists, not just among BRICS countries, but many other countries in the world as well, with the structure of some parts of international governance. Maybe not all of it, but those that are identified with the Bretton Woods institutions, and that not that they are completely inadequate, but they are not appropriate anymore for the international situation that we live in. And because of that, I think I come to one point that you made in terms of the major decision that was taken at Fortaleza last year was precisely was a way to respond to that, which was the creation of the New Development Bank and the contingency reserve arrangement, which are forms of not going, let's say, against those institutions, but trying to complement them and to respond more adequately to what BRICS and many other countries, I think, feel would be a better way to deal with the problems that they face. Now, we can go more specifically on that, whether it's a sort of infrastructure development within BRICS and other developing countries, or other types of activities. But the New Development Bank is seen as something that will complement and will be more adequate for those countries that are increasingly having an impact in the world. And and then I think related to that, you have an issue which is also very important for Brazil, as I'm sure it is also for India and for South Africa, and which is that of the reform of other international institutions. And there we have the financial institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, but particularly the IMF and the voting rights and the voting the weighted voting that is in that institution, and giving more relative power to those countries that have an increasing impact in the world economy. And I think that's one ongoing negotiation that right now I think is very much contained by the necessary ratifications and approvals within, in particular, the U.S. Congress, but it is something that is an ongoing aspiration of the BRICS countries and of others who seek more voice in that particular institution, the IMF. Another one in the political area, of course, is the expansion of the UN Security Council, and that's something that we have seen in previous declarations of BRICS. And again, Brazil does have a strong position there, and we also hope to see reflected in the declaration, again, a strong sense of the need to reform that organ and to update it to current international realities. I think those are major aspirations that we see. They are not new; they have been there for some time, but this is an ongoing issue and struggle, and we really see that as something that we hope to see in the declaration again. Now, I think basically all this has to do with really, a sense that governance is not adequate and that it needs to be reformed, that it needs to be at least complemented by new institutions, or it needs to be seen in a different light. I think those are important points to be borne in mind in terms of our aspirations that you put. Now, on some specific issues, I think as Secretary Mehta also mentioned, the economic strategy seems to be an important issue that we will probably see also reflected there. I don't have details because I'm not, I haven't been able really to go into the details of that. I think a lot of it still needs to be worked out. The Sherpas and sub-Sherpas are going to meet in the next few days in Moscow, just prior to the UFA summit. So, but I think that's one important issue. Then you have other global issues that inevitably form part of the BRICS agenda. And again, it was said here that the Fortaleza Declaration deals with many issues on the international agenda. There you will see, of course, in some of them more coincidence, in other issues less, but the fact that these are big countries that have big impact in the world, I think inevitably leads them to have something to say on most, if not all, international issues there. But yes, there will be some differences there, and depending on the issue. If you take some very specific issues like, well, some regional conflicts or some of the issues like the sanctions, we will see some common positions, but depending on the issue, they will be more or less detailed. And for example, the international environment and climate change, that is something that, 4 out of the 5 have usually work out their positions in coordination. And so we will probably see something there, and may not be as detailed as in other issues, but I think we will see also statements on that. And well, then you will also have some issues that are quite new, such as cybersecurity. It's something that is, there was a conference in Brazil last year in São Paulo, and there again we see that within the BRICS you have different internal approaches, different legislation, different scope of how to deal with these questions. They are, like I said, they're relatively new. I mean, we have this conference in São Paulo was, I think, one of the first major efforts to deal with this globally. So we will see the reflection of that as much as possible, I think, in the declaration. And some other issues seem to be very important for, at least for the developing countries part of BRICS, those that have greater identity among themselves as developing countries, in particular Brazil, India, South Africa, with issues such as poverty alleviation, and that we see a big scope for cooperation in this area, in this part of the social agenda. Another area that we also see a lot of scope for cooperation is in the health area, and we have had sectorial meetings on health ministers from BRICS on that. So I think those issues, I mean, are probably going to be the ones that we will be seeing reflected in the UFA agenda, with more or less depth or more or less detail. But being a grouping as BRICS is, I think it is inevitable that it will pronounce itself on all of the issues that I mentioned. A final word maybe on taking on a little bit on this last point, on the identity that we see amongst Brazil, India, and South Africa, in particular, with regard to the development agenda. And what was said about IBSA, I think, again, Secretary Mehta put it very, very correctly in terms of IBSA being a group that would merit a standalone summit, and the difficulties on the agenda that have prevented this summit to take place. It's important to bear in mind in this respect that last year was a year of major elections in India and in South Africa in the first semester, and in Brazil in the second semester. That didn't help having this summit. And as she said, the coordinator for the next summit is India. So I'm sure it is looking for a space that would be viable for all leaders to meet and to carry on with IBSA. Even though I think even though IBSA has not been able to meet at the highest level, it has continued to work, and it continues to finance projects in least developed countries. It continues to have its impact, and it meets regularly in terms of at working level in New York. So I think that's something that I should also mention right now. So those are the remarks. Thank you very much.